Welcome to the screencast for the Ethics Application Assignment. In this screencast, we will cover the assignment requirements. For the Ethics Application Assignment, you will need to fill in Section 1 of the Human Research Ethics form using plain language to communicate to the Ethics Committee. The writing should still be clear and succinct, but targeted at an audience who do not have a background in psychological science. In Section 1, you will need to clearly communicate the background to your study, the rationale for why your study is important, the aim or aims of your study, and the hypotheses. Before you begin your assignment, you should read the marking criteria and frequently refer to this document whilst you are completing your assignment. For the Ethics Application Assignment, you must come up with an original research idea in the general area of growth mindset. Your study design should be a simple quantitative study with only one IV and one DV. The IV or independent variable is what you or nature manipulates. It could be a treatment or a program. It's some kind of cause, and the dependent variable, or DV, is what is affected by the independent variable. It is your effects or your outcomes. It's what you expect to change with the manipulation of the independent variable. The study that you design must either be experimental or quasi-experimental. An experimental design is where the experimenter has control over who goes into each group or condition and can therefore randomly assign participants to conditions. On the other hand, a quasi-experimental design is where the experimenter does not have control over who goes into each condition. For example, an experimenter cannot allocate people to be either male or female. This kind of independent variable is known as an individual differences independent variable, and this would constitute a quasi-experimental design. You will have the opportunity to discuss experimental and quasi-experimental designs along with other research designs in the weekly live class. Finally, remember to keep the design simple. Complex research designs require more thorough consideration, more complex statistical analyses, and often a larger word count to explain the design. By keeping the design simple, you will ensure you have sufficient words to explain the design in enough depth and with enough justification for your marker. If you are unsure whether your design is too complex, please email your instructor to check. In this screencast, we are going to fill out Section 1 of an ethics form together using a worked example of a study on risky driving behaviour. At this point, you will want to open a copy of the ethics application template so that you can follow along and enter information into the form as we progress through this screencast. The ethics assignment template can be downloaded from Moodle. The worked example we will be using in this screencast is not a perfect example of a background section. This example is just to give you a basic idea of what information should be included in Section 1 of the ethics application. The example we will be using is a study on the use of feedback regarding risk tendencies and whether this can be used to reduce risky driving behaviour in young novice drivers. This study is titled The Victorian Driving Risk in Young People Study. In Section 1.1 of the form, you will need to write the study title. In Section 1.2, you will need to outline the primary or chief investigator and any co-investigators. Here you can see that you have included the study title in Section 1.1 and provided details of the chief investigator in 1.2. This section of the form is very straightforward. You just enter the name and details of the investigator, which for this assignment will be you. Use Monash as your institution, and use some creative license for the experience section. I have seen students turn into Nobel laureates and distinguished professors overnight. So feel free to give yourself a quick promotion. The main point of this section is to demonstrate to the Ethics Committee that you have the necessary background, experience, and qualifications to conduct the research study in a competent and ethical manner. For the second box in section 1.2, you can add another researcher or keep this section blank. Again, if you decide to include a co-investigator, you can use some creative license. For this assignment, you can leave section 1.3 blank. For section 1.4, you should structure your plain language description of the research by introducing the importance of the broader topic. Here you can see that the researcher has indicated that motor vehicle accidents are a leading cause of death and injury in young people worldwide. This is establishing the importance of the research in this population. Next, the researcher introduces the specific topic for the current study, which is decision-making and young adulthood. Then, the researcher outlines the gap in current knowledge or literature, which then logically leads to the rationale or purpose of the study. The rationale of the study can be thought of as the logical reason why the research should be conducted. Make sure you observe the word limit for section 1.4a to avoid any word count penalties. The aim is the broad objective that you hope to achieve by conducting the study, and the hypothesis is the predicted effect or outcome that you expect based on the previous literature or what you can logically argue should occur. Again, when you enter in your aims and hypotheses in section 1.5, make sure you observe the word limit. In section 1.6a of the form, you indicate what type of research the project is. In this example, it is part of an honours project. This section is fairly straightforward, but you will want to ensure the response here is consistent with the information provided in section 1.2 on the chief and co-investigators. In section 1.6b, you should outline the type of research. From the background information, we know this project uses survey data. So in this case, we would select quantitative as the survey produces quantitative data. Section 1.7a of the form outlines whether funding of the project will be sought. For simplicity, you can state that no funding will be sought in section 1.7a of the form. For sections 1.7b and 1.8, you can select no. This is because you won't be receiving any financial reward, and your research will be conducted at Monash University only. We have just stepped through all of the information that needs to be entered in section 1 of the ethics application form. In the weekly live class, the instructor will also outline the requirements for developing your own research study for Part A. You will also get the opportunity to ask any questions you have regarding Part A of the ethics application assignment. For the ethics application assignment, you must come up with an original research idea in the general area of risky driving behaviour. Your study design should be a simple quantitative study with only one IV and one DV. The IV, or independent variable, is what you or nature manipulates. It could be a treatment, a program, or some kind of cause. And the DV, or dependent variable, is what is affected by the independent variable. It is your effects or your outcomes. It is the variable that we measure for change as a result of the manipulation of our independent variable. Another important requirement for your design is that it must be either experimental or quasi-experimental. An experimental design is where the experimenter has control over who goes into each group or condition and can therefore randomly assign. On the other hand, a quasi-experimental design is where the experimenter does not have control over who goes into each condition. For example, an experimenter cannot allocate people to be either male or female. They are either male or female. You will have the opportunity to discuss experimental and quasi-experimental designs, along with other research designs in the weekly live class. Remember, keep the design simple. Complex research designs require more thorough consideration, more complex statistical analyses, and often a larger word count to explain the design. By keeping the design simple, you will ensure you have sufficient words to explain the design in enough depth and with enough justification for your marker. If you are unsure whether your design is too complex, please email your instructor to check.